Well, thank you everyone for your attention and for inviting me, Diane. Today I'm just going to give you a little bit of a morsel about fishes and why I find them so amazing. So I thought, there we go. With an Audubon Naturalist crowd, I thought I should compare the numbers of species of fishes to that of birds, since I know that there are a lot of birders here. And just to give you a general idea, one of the reasons that I love fishes is that they are so incredibly diverse, well, for vertebrates. John's going to come here next week and it'll be sad how few species of vertebrates there are as a whole. But if you were to take all vertebrates, mammals, birds, all snakes, lizards, frogs, caecilians, turtles, all of those, still there are more fishes than all of those other groups combined. And what I love, of course, is that you have this great diversity. Of course, you have these sorts of fishes that you see on coral reefs that everyone is familiar with, but then you have this hideous, to my mind, creature, the blobfish, that is very, very bizarre, has hardly any muscle to it, it's mostly watery. And then this anglerfish also that's a bit strange. If we go on, you have all sorts of odd creatures. This is a goblin shark. This is a unicorn fish with these big sort of noses. And then you have things that are incredibly well camouflaged. This is the sargassum sea dragon that floats along with seaweed and is quite nicely camouflaged. And then you have the real freaks of the deep sea, huge, huge teeth, this little angler that they often have, very, very strange critters. So, and then we also get into this bizarre character, the mola mola, or the sunfish, that has lost most of the normal fins that fishes have. They don't even have a tail. They're missing all sorts of things that can get as big as a Volkswagen. And then you have also, I found this interesting, Diane does not like the fact that these teeth here on this fish, this is a close relative of a piranha, and they've got really interesting teeth, and I'll talk about those in a bit. And then this is one of my new favorite fishes, these barrel eyes that have a see-through head. And so I'll talk more about that. Now, I am a functional morphologist, and I am mostly interested in the skull of fishes. And yet another reason that I love them is that you have this great variety, this weird hump. A lot of these are sexually dimorphic characteristics. You see that within fishes, you have quite a bit of diversity in skull shape, tooth shape, number of teeth, the position of the teeth. So all of this is very interesting to me. Also, you get a huge difference in sizes. Here you have a whale shark, and this is a normal sized swimmer going along. You can see how absolutely enormous they are. And here are the smallest fishes that have been identified. These are on the tip of someone's finger, and they are absolutely reproductively mature at this point. So you have many orders of magnitude difference in the size of adult fishes. And I suppose I should say the first thing you could learn here, fish, if you say many fish, you're talking about only one species. But if you have two or more species, it's fishes. So just a little thing, I've had people laugh at me for using fishes, but they also go to all sorts of extremes. You have this notothenoids, also known as ice fish, because of the fact that they are in freezing water. And they actually have antifreeze. And I know Martha's in the crowd, just the same way that a lot of crops sweeten up in winter. If you get these fish during the coldest time, they are actually sweeter because it's a type of sugar that they use as an antifreeze. And then on the other extreme, you have these desert pupfish, which are in these thermal pools, and they are fine up to over 100 degrees. So they have all sorts of enzymes that allow them to survive at these extremes. Now, what makes fish different from other vertebrates? In many ways, they share a lot of the same characteristics. However, they do have certain sensory systems that many others do not. And the first of these is electroreception. And they use these structures known as the ampullae of Lorenzini. And these are actually used for detecting electricity, current in the water. So this is probably not a sight many people would like to have, this shark oncoming. But if you look at these little pores here, these are little pores that if we then go on here and look at what they would look like in cross-section, these are the surface pores. All of these are filled with this jelly-like conducting jelly. And down here are these nerve fibers. So they actually can detect this. And lots of work has been done where they have pools, like wading pools, and they have sharks or stingrays inside, and they have little electrodes with weak signal, and the fish will key in on those right away. Now, this is part of the reason that sharks are considered such, oh, they're such killers and they're so violent, because oftentimes people are chumming in the water and the sharks come up and they start biting the boat. The reason for this is that as sharks approach, they sort of go through their different sensory systems. First they smell, then they're actually attracted by vision. And at the last moment when they're going to attack, you may have seen sharks and skates and rays are some of the only fishes that have eyelids. And these are protective and they come up over the eye, as you can see here. At this point, the animal is blind and is using largely that sort of electroreception in order to be able to get at the prey. Fish also have a capacity to detect water movement. And here they use this system known as the lateral line. So it's this line going down the body, and if we take a look at it, they have these structures known as neuromasts. And what these neuromasts do is that they detect movement of water. And you may think, well, how good could that possibly be? It's really, really good. Because what happens if you take fish and you blind them, not gouge out their eyes, but just cover up their eyes and put them into a tank. If you put a whole school of blinded fish in, they can still school perfectly well using that lateral line system. So I say that they can see in, or it helps them if they live in the dark. How well do fishes see? And again, of course, it depends on what kind of fish you are. If you happen to be this type of four-eyed fish, you see incredibly well. And you see incredibly well not only in the water, you see incredibly well in air. Because these are fish that are in pretty shallow water, and they have predators coming from above, birds coming from above, and fish predators coming from below. So what they have is they don't really have four eyes, but what they have is a divided eye, which you can see here right at the level of the water. There's part of the eye above, part of the eye below, and light comes in and it goes through a very different lens, size of the lens, depending on whether that light is coming from above or whether it's coming from below. And you have the retina that contains the cones and rods here. You have two parts, one part here, one part here. They're able to resolve in both, for images both in water and in air, which is a really nice thing if you're being preyed upon by both terrestrial and aquatic organisms. But some fishes actually are blind, and there are quite a few that are blind. And here you can see one species and a few others here. And one that has been especially well studied are these blind and eyed cavefish. Now, this is the same species. They just happen to have different populations. Some populations live in caves and never see the light of day. These that have lost their eyes and pigmentation, these are on the surface and they can see everything just fine. the thing that's nice is that because of the fact that they're the same species, they can be bred and you can do all sorts of cool work with them. I'll tell you about some of that. But perhaps you should ask the question of why keep your eyes in the first, why lose your eyes? Why not just keep your eyes? And this gets at this, it's been proposed, this notion of an expensive tissue hypothesis. And brain is very expensive tissue. And researchers have found that eyes, just the maintenance of the eyes and the area, specifically the area of the brain, which you can see here, this midbrain and optic tectum in the eyed versus in the blind fish, that maintenance of that tissue can account for up to 15% of the metabolic cost to these fishes. So why lose your eyes? Because eyes are really very expensive. And as I said, because of the fact that you have the same species that are blind or eyed, you can do really nice crosses with these. If you can get them together and cross the eggs and sperm, you can get these sorts of intermediates. Now, if you don't have an eye, what do you do with this extra space? Because it seems like you've opened up a whole lot of real estate. Now, those neuromasts that I talked about before with the lateral line system, what you have with neuromasts, they're along the body. However, fishes that are in caves or in deep, deep water have these neuromasts all over their body to be able to detect vibrations, be it prey, a predator, a mate. And so what you see here with these cave fish is all of these green dots that you see all over the side of the face are these neuromasts, so that they can actually pick up on vibrations. You see that there are relatively few with the eyed species here, and then the intermediates are somewhere in between. So, and you may be familiar with a flounder. A flounder is actually on its side on the bottom, and you have what is known as the eyed side and then a blind side here. But what some people don't realize is that they actually are not born this way. When they are first larval fish, they have an eye on either side. And it's only over time, as they're undergoing metamorphosis, that one of the eyes literally sculpts a hole through the skull and it moves over. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think a video is even worth more. So here is a video of this developing larval fish. So you can see it undergoing changes still. Both eyes are on either side. But now, as it's undergoing, you can start to see that eye peeking over and finally coming over to the side of the head. And there you go. You end up with a little baby flounder with two eyes on one side of its head. So now I'm going to stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions. I'm trying to break this up a little bit. Is there a question in the chat box or in a non-cave? That's a great question. So the question is, if blind cave fish are placed in a non-cave environment, will their offspring have eyes? It's the most bizarre thing. I did not believe my friend who told me you can now go to an aquarium. You can go to lots of places that sell cave fish. And she purchased the cave fish and it was doing really great in her tank at home. And she actually told me that it was growing an eye. And I just did not believe that. I thought that can't possibly be. But I went over and sure enough, because they have all of the developmental genetics that grew this eye in the first place, if it's getting the input of light, those systems can start up again and you can get a small eye. I don't know if hers was an odd situation, but purportedly that is the case. And oddly, with the flounder also, there is, I have heard that if you keep them getting light from all sides, they will not actually move the eyes over. That's yet to be published. I don't think anyone has done that work yet. How many species of cavefish are there? There's an Ozark cavefish in Missouri. There are many cavefish because it's not just this particular group. There are other species, and there are some from many different families. I don't know how many there are, but there are quite a few. Any other questions, or shall we return? Okay. So, all right, so we've seen this. Now, perhaps the most bizarre cases are, again, deep water fishes. And so these are not so deep that they don't see any light at all. So they actually, and with fluorescent animals, they want to be able to see those things. So they have really very huge eyes, and you see them, thus the name barrel eye, this barrel-like structure here on all of these fishes is the reason for their name, but perhaps the most bizarre of these is this little guy. And it actually has a transparent head. And so you may think, oh, well, those eyes aren't very big. Just to give you a little orientation, I'm going to play a video, but these are the nostrils. And these big green structures here are the lenses. When I saw this, I thought it had to have been an artistic representation. There's no way it actually looks like that. And then I found this video, so you can see.
Photographed 2,000 feet deep in the Pacific Ocean off the California coast, the Macropinna microstoma, known as the barrel-eye fish, is small and dark with large fins, a tiny mouth, and unusual barrel eyes under a transparent dome. The two green spheres in the video are the lenses of its tubular eyes. The eyes are enclosed within the transparent shield, sort of like the glass canopy of a jet fighter. Above the mouth, the two dark capsules that appear to be eyes actually contain the fish's olfactory organs, or the equivalent of nostrils. Typically, the barrel eye sits quietly in the water, using its big fins for stability while it scans the water above for food. When it spots food, it can rotate its eyes to look forward, to include its mouth in the field of view. Scientists speculate that the barrel eye steals food from siphonophores, elongated jellies with tentacles that capture prey that swims into them. They believe the barrel eye swims into the tentacles and steals the food from the siphonophore. The shield over its eyes protects them from the stinging cells of the siphonophore's tentacles. The barrel eye can also rotate its eyes to avoid predators, or avoid being captured by scientists. The fish discovered alive by the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute is the first specimen of its kind to be found with its soft, transparent dome intact. It had been known since 1939, but only from mangled specimens dragged to the surface by nets.
All right. And so that one is very bizarre, but here, in some ways, even more unusual is this glass head barrel eye. So before we get into that, I want to give you a very short and sweet lesson on eye structures. So here you have the eye of a shark, and here is the lens. Light will come in through here. In red is the retina. And then right behind it is the structure known as a tapetum lucidum. This is the structure that is responsible for eye shine, which you see here. And this is important because this animal has been able to take that tapetum lucidum that is very shiny and uses it actually to reflect light. So the reason that sharks have this tapetum lucidum is if they are in the dark, light will go through once past the retina, hit that tapetum lucidum, the shiny surface, and reflect back. And so they get two chances of making sense of that light with their rods and cones. That tapetum lucidum then is a structure that is available to these barrel eyes to create a reflective surface. And what has happened, we don't know exactly how. I would love to see how exactly this develops, but the eye sort of twists during the course of development so that you then have two sets of eyes. You have the normal, whatever normal is in a fish, a normal eye, like the barrel eyes, with this very large lens that projects here to this green surface that is the retina. But then you also have a mirror here made from that tapetum lucidum. Light from below can hit that, reflect, and hit this other little piece of the retina so that they are able to see anything from above or from below. And when you are in a light-challenged environment, you want to be able to see all around you. So that's another eye adaptation. And then you have also some fishes, billfishes and tunas that are in pretty deep water and it's very, very cold. And I already told you that the brain is a very expensive tissue and it can actually not do so well at those cold temperatures. So it would be great to be able to keep your brain and your eyes warm. And these fishes, what they have done is actually make a heater out of an eye muscle. So here in red is this modified ocular or eye muscle, and you can see how close it is to the brain right here. And it's really interesting. If you go and lift weights, you know that you're going to be doing work of lifting those weights. However, your muscles are also going to heat up or heat you up because they're going to be giving off heat. That's the whole point of shivering, is to make heat. What these muscles have done is that they've become modified. They have lost those contractile elements, so they can no longer contract, and essentially as calcium is poured in, they become absolutely a heater. All right, so do fishes hear, and how do they hear? Most people get confused. I have a lot of times my students say, well, they can't hear, they don't have ears. We think ears like our ears, but that's really only the external ear. It's useful, but that's not really where the most interesting things happen. Here, just for comparison, is a human ear, or the inner ear of a human. And the cochlea is actually where all of the hearing is. Any of you who've ever had a bad ear infection know that the rest of this is important for balance. And so you actually, in humans, we have the exact same structures that fishes have for hearing. We use them for balance. We have these little stones known as otoconia that sit on a membrane, and every once in a while they get dislodged and you have massive vertigo. And you have to go to the doctor and try to get these settled back into their proper orientation. Well, fishes have these little stones. They sit on the sensory epithelium, and because of the fact that they are so much more dense than the rest of the fish, when a sound wave hits, it's going to vibrate, and that little stone will vibrate on top of a sensory membrane, and this is how the fish hears. Curiously, those of you who like trees, otoliths are very much, those little stones in fishes are known as otoliths. They, much like trees, actually have growth rings. So if you have these otoliths and section them and look carefully, you can get down to the day of how old that fish is, and by looking at how widely spaced they are, it can tell you something about the nutritional. I'm not an expert on otoliths, but I appreciate that there are such experts, and quite frankly, they are so expert in otoliths that if you send them an otolith, they can tell you what species it's from. So there is that much diversity in these ear stones. And if you're always looking around for pictures of otoliths, I was surprised to find that otoliths actually are on Etsy and all different little craft online shops, and for earrings. So wearing otoliths, who knew? Now, I have to give you a little bit of detail here on air bladders, and probably most of you are aware of the fact that fishes have a swim bladder or an air bladder. What it does is help them keep position. So you can imagine that if a fish doesn't have any way of compensating that BC, if any of you are divers, a BC, a buoyancy compensator, helps you stay in one position without having to be constantly swimming up, then swimming down, then swimming up. So this is a great cost benefit for the fishes to be able to hold position. And these are the air bladders that you see here, and another one here. Well, there are hearing specialists, and some of these are cichlid fishes in Africa, which I'll mention in a little bit, but they actually have extensions. They look like little devil horns that come from these gas bladders and almost touch these otoliths. Again, the difference in the density of the air bladder versus the fish, that air bladder, when sound waves hit, will vibrate and they will hit those otoliths, and this is how a fish will hear. Now, the absolute hearing specialists, the Mac Daddies, the winners of the hearing world in fishes are goldfish, catfish, minnows, all of this group that have this structure known as a Weberian apparatus. Now, before I explain that, again, you come for fish, you get a little bit of a hearing lesson. So here are sound waves coming in. This is the middle ear cavity. Here is the eardrum, which you see moving. And then the three smallest bones in the human body are these three ear ossicles. The vibration of that tympanum or eardrum causes these three bones to move, and that movement ultimately, through a rather complex process, is what results in us hearing sound and being able to make out different frequencies. In these fishes, we have a beautiful example of convergent evolution. You have the gas bladder. I already told you that it vibrates with those sound waves. That gas bladder happens to be connected to three key elements. There's a fourth one, but these are the three key bony elements, very much like these bony elements. And these are derived from ribs and vertebral elements. And in the exact same way that we hear through that vibration, they hear through this sort of vibration. This gives them a much greater sensitivity, and they have the greatest frequency range of hearing in any fish. And they are able to detect sounds very, very well. All right, now how do fishes feed? This is actually an area near and dear to my heart. I have done some work on the Weberian apparatus, but most of the work I've done is on feeding structures in fishes. So some fish don't have jaws. If we look at the most primitive fishes, they did not have jaws. And one of these is known as a hagfish, or this lovely term of slime hag. A slime hag, why? Their great claim to fame is that they can produce enough mucus to, if you have one hagfish in a 10-gallon bucket and you disturb it slightly, you end up like this gentleman here with this big ball of mucus. I imagine that as a predator, you only make the mistake once of trying to eat a hagfish. And again, the face only a mother could love, very bizarre. Also, another fish that does not have jaws are lampreys. And what they do is hook onto big game fish. You can tell this one already has a scar from one keeling over. They have this horrific, what is known as a buccal funnel that they make a nice seal with. And then they have this keratinized tooth that they scrape the flesh open. And then they have anticoagulant also. And so they sit and suck the fluids and blood of this animal. However, most fishes do indeed have jaws. Most fishes now. There's a huge lineage of fishes that are extinct that do not have jaws, but most of them have these jaws. And probably most fishes use some kind of suction feed. What do I mean by that? They open up their head and they have a really kinetic head. As far as humans go, the extent of our capacity to move any bone in our head is just the jaw. That's it. Fishes have, I think, about 18 degrees of freedom, so they can really explode their head out, and it's really very efficient for sucking in a small goldfish.
Look at that. Look at that. Awesome.
So this is how most fishes feed. However, this is not to say that there aren't some real biters out there. And this is a species that is near and dear to my heart. This is what I did my master's degree on. This is the sheep's head. It has these incisor-like teeth in the front and then big molars in the back. Here you also see these parrotfish. You can make out in this slide, hopefully, that it looks like they're all separate teeth, and that's exactly what it is. It's separate teeth that have gotten welded together to make this sort of beak. You also have, apologies to Diane, but this is a relative of the piranha. It's called a pacu. It eats mostly nuts and seeds and has really very cool teeth. Here is a barracuda, very, very sharp teeth, and of course the menacing teeth of the shark, where they have multiple rows that are replaced. And then you have this goblin shark. They can also throw out their jaws. That sort of protrusion of the jaws is very, very common. And then you have this, which is
cookie cutter. Sorry.
Cookie cutter, exactly. The cookie cutter shark. Here is, again, a poor fish that has been preyed upon. Here, they can dig those teeth in and essentially scrape out an entire nice round area. So I am stopping here at the cookie cutter for any questions, and there seem to be some. Okay, the heater. The heater is in the same species. There are several species that have independently evolved that heating element of the eyes. Yes, so we know from, Steve, I love this. We know from Neil Shubin's discovery of Tiktaalik how fish evolved from fins and four-legged animals. What changes in eye development occurred during the evolution of fish to amphibians? That's a great question. I am not a sensory biologist. However, certainly you get eyelids forming, which is curious because the fishes that are the most closely related to Tiktaalik, etc., did not have eyelids. That's a good question. And of course, there had to be huge changes in the way they were able to process aquatic vision versus aerial. Something that was probably very helpful there is that a lot of those fishes that gave rise ultimately to Tiktaalik already were making some forays out into land. It seems like fish have a very diverse eye formation and also very sophisticated. Is there any theory as to why fish have such diverse eyes? Well, they have a lot of different environments. You know, for example, coral reef fishes are going to be in an environment where color is very, very important. You can imagine that in a cave, but even in deep sea, you don't get a lot of cones at all because they hardly see any sort of color. And the three-dimensionality versus open ocean. So I personally think that it's due to how many different environments they have taken over. What do oxygen isotope studies of otoliths tell us about the environmental history of fishes? I am certain many, many things can be learned from that. I have not done that personal work, but I know that there are a lot of people that study the actual composition of the bone that is being laid down during the course of a fish's lifetime. And no, lampreys are, because lampreys are vertebrates, they are not related to leeches, although they have some of that same nasty habits. Do fish have irises to control the amount of light coming in? They do have some muscles that allow some control, and then they're a little bit different in that the lens is pulled back and forth as opposed to changing the shape of the lens as we see sometimes. So, okay. Any more questions? I think we're good here. So I will share screen and we can move on to the last bit of this talk. It's going to get good, my friends. I've saved the best for last, I promise. All right. So, and here you have a deep sea fish, really pointy teeth. This fish, I'm not sure if it's this one or a closely related one. Sometimes these fangs get so long that they actually go through the top of the skull, which just seems an weird thing to do, but fishes don't play by the rules. Here is a big whale shark, and they have modified those structures that usually hold onto the gills and just help support the gills. They have modified those to filter feed. And then we have the piranha, and I was lucky enough to have a postdoc in my lab last year, and we did some work on piranhas and made this wonderful discovery that piranhas have these interlocking teeth. That how exactly do you build this? How do you develop this? We found out that they actually build it like an entire saw. So it's all connected right here. You can see this here, and these fish lose the tooth, the entire tooth row at once, and then the replacement tooth row comes up as one unit. Here, by the way, you can see in this CT scan, you can see these otoliths also. All right. Feeding, there's so much work done on feeding, and one of the groups that has been studied more than others are cichlids because they've undergone what are known as adaptive radiation. So within these predominantly three lakes in Africa, it is thought that there was an ancestor that went into this environment and then they just absolutely diverged their morphology, diverged their anatomy, in order to be able to feed on different things. And we have done some work on some different adaptive radiations. As I said before, you have these parrotfish they're my favorite fish when I go snorkeling, and they've got these big jaws, and what they're doing is scraping algae from the coral, but they end up consuming quite a bit of coral themselves, and they are very, very important for the ecology of the reef because, how can I put this nicely? Essentially, their poop is sand that they are adding to their coral reef environment. So they are very important. Now, something that some people are not aware of is that fishes have two sets of jaws. So I've been talking about this front set, but if we look here are what are known as the oral jaws. but in the back of their throat, they have pharyngeal jaws. These are jaws made from modified elements that originally were only helping to hold the gills. And what that allows for, if we take the fish out of the equation, it's kind of nice because you can do one thing here with this set of jaws and something completely different back here. For example, the parrotfish have these scrapey jaws that they use to scrape algae, but then they have these plates that actually grind down that coral and they're able to get all of the algae from it. Now, moray eels also have these bizarre jaws, which you can see here held in the back, but they can move forward. You can see it here in an X-ray. Here are these jaws, but they can move forward, which you can see here in the back, and then they come forward. But of course, again, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and of course I had to include Alien. People who watch horror movies have no idea that biology has done all of these things way before someone in Hollywood probably stole the idea. But if you look at this video and pay attention right in this area, you will actually see those pharyngeal jaws come forward and help this animal to eat. So there you see those jaws coming forward and pulling this back. And there you go. Once again, if you pay attention right at the very back of the mouth, there come those jaws and they pull it back. And of course, this is my favorite video to show anytime, but fish are also able to shoot their mouth forward in order to surprise prey. So they essentially have such a kinetic, such a mobile skull that they essentially make a straw out of their own head and suck things in. All right, now, I told you I left the best for last. How do fishes reproduce? You know, there are lots of fish that they lay eggs, the male comes, deposits his sperm, and that's about it. But there are some wonderful exceptions, which of course I will cover. There is quite a bit of sexual dimorphism. Some of it is relatively subtle. These fishes here, the male has this little bit of a sticky outy fin, sword tails, thus named for this long sword at the back of the tail. The males have that, the females just go crazy for it. A lot of fishes have intromittent organs, so the pelvic fins have become modified for internal fertilization because a lot of fish are viviparous. They give birth to live young. Sometimes you have color differences. Sometimes you have this, what seems like a very bad case of acne. These are known as breeding tubercles, and the ladies go crazy. But this here with the anglerfish is perhaps the most extreme case. Here you have a female anglerfish, and these are the males. When the males make contact with the female, they will bite onto the female and essentially become attached to her. Here we have two males. Oftentimes the females have been found with up to 3 different males attached to her, but they will degrade. Here it sort of looks like a fish, normal eye. Here they're sort of degrading. Ultimately, they become essentially a bag of sperm that the female carries around. When she deposits the egg, she knows that she will have the sperm there to fertilize her eggs. All right, but I said most fish, sexual reproduction. You do have some cases of parthenogenesis. However, this is sperm dependent. Parthenogenesis, you need sperm in order to start development, but that sperm does not add anything to the genetic mix. These are known as Amazonian mollies, and they will produce all females that are exactly like them. Now, what they need is sperm. If there is not, they don't have any males in this species, so what do? They actually use sperm of a closely related. These are the same genus, but a different species. You think, boy, what dummies. They don't realize their sperm is being wasted. Why would you do that? There have been studies that showed that the males actually females of their own species find them much more attractive. If you're able to breed with that Amazonian Molly, wow, you've got the stuff. So they actually do okay themselves. And we have many cases of sex change. I don't want to break anyone's heart, but Nemo, a movie I absolutely adore, the dominant female, remember mom dies, and then Marlin, I think, the dad. If Nemo were an accurate representation, dad would have actually turned into the dominant female. And in perhaps the best line ever, whoever wrote this paper said, low-ranking males are psychophysiologically castrated because these undifferentiated fishes are actually males that, because of their pecking order, if you will, are abused into staying neither fully male nor female. And it is, if you put two male clownfishes together, ultimately one of those males will start doing the behaviors of the female. They get much, much bigger. Their brain starts seeming like that of a female, and she can be completely acting like a female, top of the couple here, but she can still not have fully differentiated into having the capacity to produce eggs. So the behavior comes first. The behavior drives changes in the brain, and then ultimately you get these differences in the actual capacity to make eggs. Now, that is normal sex change in fishes, which is very, very common. This is abnormal case. You have endocrine disrupting compounds. This is a male, again, having this gonopodium, the intermittent organ that is common for a male. This is what a female looks like. When you have endocrine disruptors, you start getting females that look like males. In the same way, you can have BPA, which we're mostly done with now, and people are aware of it. Here are control fishes, and the males are very, very colorful. If they are exposed to this BPA, an estrogen mimic, they actually do not develop proper coloration, and then the females can't identify them as members of their own species. So, and you then get breakdown of species borders. Here we have, I wanted to show you some cichlid nests. You have a lot, this is very, very common among fishes, that they make, the male makes a nest and then sort of shows off to the females, and then the females will come in and breed. The male and female will breed, and then this is a female holding eggs. The females will hold the eggs. There is quite a bit of parental care, some by the male, some by the female. These are, they build bubble nests, keep them really well oxygenated, and tend to the larvae. Sticklebacks oftentimes will drive away the female after she lays the eggs, and he will take care of them. Odd structures of the forehead, where the fish will carry around its young on its forehead, or whatever a fish forehead is. Very, very common to raise these fishes in their mouths. And then, of course, the champion of seahorse parental care is the father, who is responsible for receiving the eggs from the female. So here's a female putting the eggs into the father's pouch. He will fertilize those eggs, and when the time is ripe, all right. So, okay, so pharyngeal jaws are also known as throat plates. Are throat plates also made from gill arches? Oh, in the California sheep's head. I know that California sheep's head are a totally different species than the sheep's head I'm familiar with. So they do have, they are modified bones that grow teeth that are indeed part of the gill arches. I don't know exactly what the California sheep's head, what that is in reference to. If someone wants to turn on their microphone, I would be happy to take that question.
Yeah, it was about the throat plates.
Yeah, they do have throat plates. I think that those sheep's head, yes, they do, because I had this is the problem with common names within fishes. I had a somewhat heated discussion with someone about sheep's head. They don't have pharyngeal jaws. What are you talking about? They have huge ones. We were talking about different sheep's heads. So,
Yeah. This is a sheep head, no S.
yeah.
No.
Okay, so yes, this is the California one, and they have very large pharyngeal jaws. Do fish feel pain and suffer when hooked? Yeah, there was every reason to believe that fish do suffer. They have a cortisol response, and there are enough clues that tell us that they indeed do suffer. I'm really sorry for those of you who are into fishing. And how can bycatch be reduced in commercial fishing? I think that it depends on what type of fish you're going for. I actually was involved in a bycatch study for mullet fishermen, and I was sort of shocked. I think we had maybe in surveying them hundreds, thousands of fishes, there were probably 5 fish that were bycatch. They would hit true, but mullet are, you have to be really good and know what you're doing, and they move in tight schools. So if you're good fishermen, you can get them without getting anything else. And I think also getting proper nets that can allow for escape of smaller fishes, etc. Oh yes, they do vocalize. That's part of the reason that, you wonder, why do fish hear? They can actually hear prey. They can also hear each other. There are calls that are made. There is one particular type of fish, and I can't remember the common name right now, but they call to each other, and they call by expanding their swim bladder as much as possible, and then they strum it like a drum. And they have to make this swim bladder so big in order to do this that they have to get under a ledge to keep from bobbing up to the surface, because they have to overfill this thing. But they make quite a loud sound, and an amazing amount of energy is used in that sort of vocalization. Croakers, there you go. Absolutely. Parthenogenesis in sharks. Is it sperm dependent? I don't think so. I think that particular type of, although with fishes it's always hard to say absolutely, because there are always exceptions to things, but that gynogenesis, that is the sperm dependent, I think is particular to that group of fishes.
I think Martha had written a question before Frank. Do you see that one?
I do. So, hey, of course I study things that are cool. Selection pressures that led to paternal care in seahorses. I don't know specifically in seahorses. It's just not that uncommon. A lot of catfish, the female lays the eggs, and then the male fertilizes them, but then the male is the one that takes them up in his mouth. There are lots of fish, gouramis, that make these sorts of bubble nests. There's a lot of paternal investment. So I don't know specifically about seahorses, but that paternal care is not that unusual among fishes. visited, and they were able to imprint, the otoliths using temperature cycles. Oh, that's so cool. I can imagine, absolutely. You put them through a particular condition and you will get that, that scored in the otolith.
It's 8 o'clock.
All right. And there is my computer that tells me every hour, so I can feel bad about not having worked more. Any other questions before we go? You can just ask them out loud. You don't have to.
Thank you for sharing your wonderful enthusiasm.
That I have in spades.
Fascinating stuff.
Yes, thank you so much, Patricia. This was fantastic.
Great.